Hey ecofictologists, how are you today? My name is Lovis and today I want to talk about the breadth of ecofiction as a genre, but not necessarily just as a genre of books. The definition I gave in my ecofiction definitions video was that ecofiction is fiction where nature and the relationship between humanity and the physical environment play a major role in the plot. Nowhere in that definition does it say that it has to be a novel. I am fully aware that not everybody likes to read. Our minds work in very different ways, and there are so many ways to tell a story, and some of those methods will reach a different audience than others. Ecofiction needs the biggest audience it can get, so it's only natural that creators of ecofiction will use different methods in order to tell their story. Today I'm going to focus on the medium of video games. Gaming is absolutely massive. It engages people from all kinds of ages, occupations, social backgrounds, lifestyles, really all different kinds of people. There are, of course, as many different types of games as there are movies or books because of this wide audience, and that means there's a space for ecofiction as well. The video game industry is one of the fastest growing media trends, so it would be silly to count it out of the ecofiction family when it has so much to offer. So my lovelies, put your gaming hats on and make sure your fingers are feeling nice and twitchy, and we'll get into it. What ecofiction tries to achieve is to take this hyper object that is our impact on the environment, this thing that is way too big to think about in its entirety, and cut it into manageable slices so that we can digest it, learn from it, and hopefully apply those lessons in our everyday lives. The idea is to make the intangible tangible, and video games have been doing that for years. As a gamer, not only is an idea put in your head like a book might do, but you are visually shown what it looks like, and you're given the capability to explore and affect the game's environment. And you win things, which always feels good. The shorter timescale of a game allows the player to see the consequences much sooner and clearer than in real life, and then move forward with this newfound knowledge, or even just attempt the game again and do better. In the context of the kind of game that we're talking about in this video, an ecological game, this is called Ecovisualisation, where the player sees the ecological consequences of their actions, which provides feedback, which is something that is often talked about in ecology. Video games train what is called systems thinking, which is the ability to see how a complex system is made up of lots of little pieces and how those little pieces connect to create the whole. Which is a concept that is at the very core of ecological study. It's kind of the whole is more than the sum of its parts kind of deal. Video games are also fun, which means that people do them voluntarily, which means that they can learn without feeling like they're being taught. They're immersive, which means all of your attention is focused on this one thing, and in our very distracted society where at any one time 4 different apps could be vying for your attention, this kind of directed focus is very valuable. Okay, some examples that I've come across. This is obviously not an exhaustive list. There are hundreds of games that have been released with an ecological focus, but if I went through all of them, not only would this video be very, very long, it would be incredibly boring. So I'm just going to pick out a couple of highlights that I've come across. One of the names that kept popping up in my research was Eco, which is an online simulated ecosystem game developed by Strange Loop Games, which is actually funded by the US Department for Education, as well as an online crowdfunding campaign. While the main objective of this game is to build technology to stop a giant meteor from crashing into the Earth, the more interesting part to me is that at the same time you have to be conscious of the amount of pollution that is leaking into the environment, produced by the very things that you're building to try and stop the meteor. This game is also highly cooperative, and without working with a team, the system will eventually break down. Not only that, but players of Eco have to replace the resources that they use, for example, planting trees if they've cut down trees for lumber, and if they don't, then they will eventually run out of resources and won't be able to progress through the game, leaving the environment barren and dead. Some of the lessons to be learned from this game are probably pretty obvious from that description, but I'm going to go through them anyway. Cooperation is really the only way that our efforts in real-world ecosystem management are going to go anywhere, and it also combats this idea that an individual's actions don't have any effect in the grand scheme of things. The balance between progress and preservation is something that we have to deal with in our everyday lives. Many of the things that we have incorporated into our routine, into how we think how life works, are very harmful to the environment. Plastics, fossil fuels, fast fashion, throwaway culture. What we need to do is come up with techniques to still get through our everyday lives while minimizing the amount of pollution and waste that we put into the environment, and we need to do it together. A study was conducted on whether eco could be an effective tool for promoting environmental awareness, and it showed that yes, gamers either learned something new or what they already knew was reaffirmed, and the highlight on cooperation was key. However, this game requires 30 consecutive days of play, and because cooperation is so valued, a player might not be able to progress if another player doesn't put in the work at the right time, so players found it sometimes a bit slow and didn't like being dependent on others. This raises an interesting question. Are we expecting too much of players with this kind of cooperative game? Are we pushing them too far? Is it too much like real life so that it negates this escapism, which is probably the reason that they started playing in the first place? It's a fine line. Moving right along, I want to talk about Wildeverse. I hope that's how you say it. Wildeverse, Wildeverse. I'm gonna go with Wildeverse. It's an augmented reality game developed by a Kenyan games developer called Internet of Elephants. A play on Internet of Everything. I see what you did there. That's very clever. They partnered up with several different conservation science experts to create a game that you can play on your smartphone where the player explores a virtual forest and they search for evidence of certain animals in order to track that and find that animal. This game is based on real animals. When I played, I found Fio, an 8-year-old orangutan, by searching for evidence of her lunch. Company founder Gautam Shah says he sees 3 primary conservation elements to the game. 1, to create a link between the players and the conservation societies doing such amazing work. Many people have no idea what that kind of work entails. 2, force the player to confront uncomfortable truths about illegal logging, poaching, and other effects of human consumption and greed. And 3, to teach. There is an educational element to this game. Players will walk away having more real-life factual information than they had when they started playing. The game was originally designed to be played outside, to also encourage people to go out, but at the moment that's a little tricky, so the developers incorporated the capability to play it indoors in a smaller area, so it's completely lockdown compatible. When I played it, an orangutan just climbed over my hallway ceiling.
What are you doing?
There's an orangutan! I'm finding the orangutan. That was a good day in lockdown. So we've had a game about pollution and systems thinking, we've had a game about conservation efforts and learning about the lives of animals that we affect every day. But what about a game that just shows you the wonder of the natural world? This game is not quite out yet. It comes out in World Oceans Week on June 11th, and I am so excited, but I thought it merited a teaser in this video, so here we go. Beyondblue is a game developed by Eline Media, who were approached by the BBC, who were working on Blue Planet at the time. To hear Michael Angst, Eline Media co-founder and CEO, talk about the project, he says the world and their fiction is more attuned to the tie between the health of the oceans and the health of the planet, and the awe of the natural wonders of the ocean has led to an enthusiasm to explore largely uncharted territory. He says that a hope for the game is that the players feel a sense of hope and a sense of urgency for the natural environment that is under real pressure. It is a near future world where we have the technology to explore parts of the ocean that are right now very difficult to get to, and does so in a non-invasive way so that the player gets the most natural experience possible. This is supposed to highlight the value of leaving as little imprint as possible on the environment that you are visiting, because you are just a visitor. It's this idea of leave only bubbles, take only pictures, right? The developers of Beyondblue consulted with marine biologists to make sure the depiction was accurate and respectful, and among those was Sylvia Earle, who was a scientific advisor of the project, and if that is not a stamp of approval, I have never heard one. There are many games that I haven't had time to talk about in this video. Red Redemption's Fate of the World came out in 2011. It's a global warming game which features scenarios that are based on actual scientific evidence, and the player has to manage environmental policies. Minecraft, which is very popular, has a new mod where now the resources that you take out do have an effect on the health of the wider ecosystem, and it encourages planting trees to offset carbon footprint. NASA actually released a game where the player identifies corals in a 3D seascape, which trains an AI to do it automatically, with the goal of mapping the ocean's coral reefs more completely. This can be considered citizen science, and there are many examples of how you can get involved in projects like that as well. Plasticity is a game developed by students at USC Dornsife, where the issue of plastic pollution is highlighted, and that is actually free to play on Steam. So I will put a link to that in the description below, as well as to all the games that I've mentioned in this video. Or if you just want to learn, Earth Primer is a science textbook turned computer game where you can explore our world in all its sciencey wonder and learn as you go. My point is that there are many ways to engage in this conversation, and if books are not your cup of tea, fine. Maybe video games are, or movies. That's coming up soon. And if you're watching this and you're a video game developer, or if you have an idea that would be great as a video game, the nonprofit Games for Change runs a climate game jam every now and then, where people come together and they prototype a game to see if it has potential, so you can get involved in that. Also, Earth Games have several games on their website that I didn't get to talk about today. They're a community of researchers, game developers, gamers, who are working to bring the latest scientific research into the video game world, and to inspire real-world action, so definitely check them out. Okay, that's it from me. I hope I've given you an overview of what video games can bring to the effort of bridging the science communication gap between scientists and the public. Ecofiction can come in many forms, and video games are a very valuable one. Leave any comments or thoughts that you have in the comment section below, and hit that subscribe button and the bell and the like button and all the buttons, and you'll get notified every time I post new content. I post every Wednesday. I'll see you next week, ecofictologists. Go play.